Let's move to energy matters, and while we try as a country to transition towards cleaner and greener energy, our current power crisis has taken precedence. This week, the Kusile power station received an exemption on sulphur dioxide emission limits from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. While this will undoubtedly help keep deeper stages of power cuts at bay, it's worrying that we cannot keep to limits on our dirty emissions. Of course, this is all related to what happened in November last year when a chimney stack at Kusile suffered severe damage. I'm joined now by Brandon Abdinor of the Centre for Environmental Rights. Mr. Abdinor, thank you so much for your time. This does date back to what happened last year at Kusile. It was a massive blow to Kusile because the damage to this chimney stack is extensive. It's going to take a long time to repair. My understanding of what is happening is that for a year, until probably the end of next year, they want to build temporary chimneys that can basically perform the same function. But this does mean that these temporary chimneys will not be fitted with these desulfurization mechanisms. So they can get the plant up and running, but they won't be able to desulfurize the emissions that come out of them. Do you understand this? Do you go, look, we get it, we absolutely have to do as much as we can? Or do you think that this is a very dangerous precedent to set despite our electricity crisis?
Good evening, Sally, and good evening to the viewers. We do have grave concerns that this does set a dangerous precedent. So just to clarify, the exemption to bypass the flue gas desulfurization has not been granted as yet. It's the process in order to get that exemption that has been granted by the minister. So probably under the state of disaster regulations, the process has been shortened so that there's a shorter public participation process. We're not sure what other of the steps that usually need to be taken in these circumstances will be bypassed. So we'll be watching that closely. But the upshot of it is that we're going to have Kusile now dumping sort of unabated sulphur dioxide, which causes a massive health risk. I mean, already the communities around these power stations have been marginalized for decades. We know that up to 2,200 deaths per year from these plants occur, and sort of countless lost hours, emergency room visits for asthma, and to the cost of around 42 billion a year to the economy. So we really need to be careful that the proper assessments do get done, that this, in fact, the cost-benefit analysis of this measure does bear out that it's the right thing to do. At the end of the day, we all want a stable electricity supply. We also want one that doesn't kill people and make them sick, and we want one that's affordable. So we need to question how much money we keep pouring into this coal-fired power generation system that's actually, at this point in time, letting us down, causing deaths, causing sickness, and obviously leading to climate change harms as well.
So to clarify, it's not the exemption granted yet, but basically they're being allowed to cut a lot of the processes and the red tape, which means they might get this exemption on these emissions a lot quicker than they normally would. I suppose you're concerned that corners are going to be cut. Have you been given much information about what this process now entails?
No, that's the problem, is the lack of transparency around this. We know what the ministry has told us in a statement yesterday. And for the rest of it, we know what the media has reported in terms of what Eskom says it wants to do. But in terms of, as I say, the actual cost-benefit analysis, what this is going to cost, exactly how long it's going to take, we don't know that. So the lack of information is very concerning.
And if it's a choice between a year or so of high sulphur dioxide emissions being pumped into the atmosphere, which of course is not ideal at all, versus an extra stage or two of load shedding for the next 2 years, I mean, it's a terrible choice to have to make. What would your choice be?
It's a very terrible choice to have to make. I mean, the one thing is we question, they say that it'll bring 2,000 megawatts onto the grid. According to the information we have, Kusile has been often providing output of a third of that. But it's not really a question of what I would do. What do the communities who have to live with these impacts, what do they say? How do they feel about that, about their health continuing to be prejudiced in this way? So that's why the public participation is so important, and why those communities need to be consulted around steps like this. It's not an easy choice, absolutely.
Yeah, you make an important point, though, that in this time of crisis, when we have real severe economic implications of the load shedding, it's so tempting to want to just ignore the real impact that coal has and these emissions have in our society. We've known for a very long time that it causes terrible health problems, huge environmental problems. What are the alternatives? I mean, have you thought about the alternatives? Because it seems that with this desire for new energy, government is looking at every green, every solar option. We're hearing today, though, that they might even be trying to import electricity from Tanzania. I mean, are there things that government hasn't thought of? Are there options that perhaps they could be pushing more strongly on?
Well, to zoom out a bit, I mean, it's well known, and all the modeling shows and continues to show that we really need to shift to renewable energy as quickly as possible. A report came out last year that indicated had we built 5 gigawatts of renewables in the last 5 years, up to 96% of load shedding would have been avoided. So we're sitting with a systemic issue where the wrong trajectory has been followed for a very long time. We are starting to see more promising moves, but again, we also see enough moves that say that there is still a lot of investment in this current system, which is letting us down. So we need to make that shift. And the technologies there, renewables are the quickest, cleanest, and cheapest way of getting more power onto the grid, and obviously the healthiest. And then from a climate change point of view, you know, if we continue to emit the way we do, we're going to start seeing ever-intensifying climate impacts, and quite frankly, they're going to make the current challenges we face look like small fry.
Yeah, thank you so much for speaking to us this evening. Important to bring attention to this issue. We have to keep our eye on the big picture as well. Brandon Abdinor of the Centre for Environmental Rights talking about that move to essentially cut the red tape and speed up the process of granting an exemption on sulphur dioxide limits to Kusile so that they can erect these temporary chimney stacks, flues, if you will. But that will mean, while they fix the main problem, they are going to shoot past the limits on sulphur dioxide, which is not good for the environment, certainly not good for the people living in those areas. Let's see if that exemption is ultimately granted.